Happy Thursday, everyone. Kevin Kruse here with a Throwback Thursday episode, all the way back to 006 with Jason Fried. Now, Jason is a big deal in the software world. He's been running Basecamp, we used to be called 37 Signals, and the 37 Signals blog for a long time. He's a really big proponent of reasonable working hours, remote working setup, no offices. Well, you don't have to have an office, and how to build a software company without a massive venture capital investment with all those crazy growth targets. So he's, they're headquartered out of Chicago. He's very well respected in the startup software community, but he's not of that Silicon Valley startup community. And one of the big takeaways I had from this conversation with him was when I asked him about what if you're in a big traditional company and you want to convince the boss to let you or someone else work remotely? He really didn't support that idea. He's like, no, this works when everybody can work remotely, when the systems and the culture and the mindset is that everybody works remotely. If you just have these strays who work from home, they're going to be treated like second-class citizens, or they're going to be forgotten about when it's time to, do those brainstorming sessions in the conference room and stuff. So that was really a big aha for me. So there's that and so many more value bombs. Enjoy this classic episode.
Would you like to accelerate your career and reach your full potential in just minutes a day? Welcome to the LEADx Show with New York Times best-selling author and Inc. 500 entrepreneur, Kevin Kruse.
What are the secrets to making remote work work? Hello, everyone. Kevin Kruse here, helping you to achieve your full potential 5 days a week. And in just a minute, we're going to talk about how to ditch the office for the benefit of both companies and their team members alike. But first, don't forget to visit LEADx.org. You'll find hundreds of articles from dozens of the best business and career writers out there. And while you're there, sign up for our quick read newsletter packed with actionable tips you can try out right away. LEADx.org. Our guest today is the co-founder and CEO of Basecamp, a Chicago-based software company formerly known as 37 Signals. His blog, Signal vs. Noise, is considered must-reading by the tech industry elite. He's the co-author of Getting Real, REWORK, and his newest book is Remote, Office Not Required. Our guest is Jason Fried. Jason, welcome.
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking.
Of course.
So we're going to talk about remote in just a minute, but I like to start with a more universal question, which is, can you share with our listeners a time when you failed, maybe early in your career, and what did you learn from it?
Sure. For me, I look at failure a little bit differently than perhaps many, because I don't really consider it that often. I don't like to dwell on the past. I don't like to really kind of even label things as failures. To me, it's all a continuum of experiences, and sometimes you get a little bit further than you don't get as far as you wished, or sometimes you get further than you thought, whatever. But the times that I would consider, if we're really going to use the word failure, is any time where my ego got the best of me. So there were times early on really early on, when I wanted to be a big company. I just had this thing, I'm not going to be taken seriously unless we're a big company. And this is when I was just working on my own. And so I just had my ego was basically not letting me be happy because I was just myself. And I kept trying to puff up my chest and act bigger than I was. And I would use the word we instead of I, even though it was just me. And, that kind of stuff. And to me, looking back on it now, I would consider that a failure of motivation and sort of vision. And I realize that when your ego gets the best of you, you just kind of make bad decisions. So I've really tried to be pretty egoless. It's not that I don't believe we're good and believe in what we're doing, but whenever I notice myself wanting to do something because of ego, I pull back and go, that's not going to end up in a good place.
That's great stuff, Jason. And listeners, I love the value bomb that was just dropped. First of all, there's no such thing as failure. You win or learn. But what I really appreciate, Jason, is you went kind of deep on the stuff about, the ego. And I learned that lesson late myself. Early on, even though my company was having what other people would consider to be great success, every year when that Inc. 500 list would come out, that magazine would come out, there'd be dozens and dozens of people, of companies higher on the list than me. And it would make me feel bad. Every year I would just feel like what a loser I am that I'm not higher on this list, rather than celebrating that I made the list. So, I finally had to realize, wait a minute, like, who am I comparing myself to and why? And it just turns out there was a lot of ego involved that I had to get over as well.
That's such a great point. And, part of it is that when you're involved in the sort of I don't know how to call it or what to call it, but when you're comparing yourself to others and you're trying to measure your success against someone else, like, you're naturally going to be disappointed in some ways, but that's an ego thing too, like, because you're just trying to be better than someone else instead of just saying, like, what's the best I can do? And so it takes a long time, and I still run into it myself, but I remember earlier in my career, I was really obsessed with that sort of measuring up and how do I measure up and why am I not on this list and why did I not win that award and that kind of stuff. And looking back on it, I wish I had those feelings back, because they caused anxiety and they made me feel like I wasn't, able, things like that. And this is ridiculous stuff. But, when you're younger, especially, you just don't really think that way. So,
yeah, I think some of this wisdom, unfortunately, just comes with age.
Yep, agreed.
So, Jason, your most recent book is Remote, Office Not Required. And let's start with the big picture. Why should we maybe ditch the traditional office? What are the benefits to the company and what are the benefits to the individual workers?
Great question. And I'll take it from both sides, right? So starting with the employees, not everybody works the same way. And so the idea that everyone has to be in an office space between certain hours, that appeals to some people, but to many people it doesn't. And some people prefer silence. Some people prefer a lot of noise. Some people prefer a lot of chaos. Some people prefer a lot of calm. It sort of depends. And when you kind of shove everybody into a space, sort of majority rules in that sense, and you have a lot of people who aren't comfortable working in that environment, but they're forced to. And I just don't really believe in forcing anyone to do anything that they're uncomfortable with. Why not let them work where they're most comfortable, where they can do their best work? And that's one side. And the other side of that is also that people they don't want their lives to be tied to a physical location necessarily. So for example, let's say you're married and your wife moves. She gets another job opportunity somewhere else and she has to take it because her career encourages her to do this and this is the next step in her career. And you have to move. Well, in many cases, normally you would have to lose your job. You'd have to tell your job that, hey, I'm moving, and they would say, well, thank you, goodbye. But I don't feel like that's fair either. So I love that people can move around and be in different places no matter, where they want to be and how they want to work, and they can still do great work. So I feel like it's great for mobility and flexibility in people's lives on the employee side. On the employer side, on the business owner side, what's great about hiring remote people is that you have the pick of the world. You can hire the best people in the world. And by the way, everyone always says they want to hire the best people in the world and they have the best people in the world. The truth is there's lots of great people all over the place. So we all might have great people. It's not like there's a small handful of great people. And that's kind of my point, which is that the chance that the best people in the world are within a 20-mile radius of your office, it's just like, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So one of our best designers lives outside of Oklahoma City. One of our best programmers has lived in 4 or 5 different cities around the U.S. We have people overseas. It's like, I just want to hire great people. They can work wherever they want. It gives me the flexibility to find them and not to be sort of stuck in a zip code or an area code. And so I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, Jason, it's funny you use that example about, if your spouse gets a job opportunity and has to move away, then you're sort of forced to quit, because that just came up a few days ago. I was out visiting a company in the Midwest. They're ranked as one of the best places to work in America. And they have this beautiful building, all these perks for their employees, 1,600 employees. And they said that, generally when people quit, it's because their spouse gets a job far away. And when I brought up the possibility of remote work, they shared their fears, like, how do we know these people are really working? And in your book, you have a funny phrase, if I can't see them, how do I know they're working? But I think that really is what it comes down to. So many managers feel like, okay, I can look out my door and see you there, and you kind of came in around 9 and you're kind of leaving around 5, so I'm assuming you're working. But if I don't see you, how the heck do I know what you're doing? So how would you argue that?
Yeah, and I get that. I understand that. That just comes from, doing something one way for a long period of time, and you just kind of assume there's no other way. the truth is just because somebody's at their desk in front of a computer typing away or whatever they're doing, it doesn't mean they're working. They're just at their desk typing away. Like, just because you can see someone physically doing something, that's not a tell. Like, if you're working in a factory and you can see someone hammering something or assembling something from far away, okay, you know they're doing that. But a lot of information work, being on Facebook, being on Twitter, being on Snapchat, being on Instagram looks the exact same as like doing your other work, right? So you can't really tell from far away if someone's doing their actual work. The only way to tell someone's doing their work is to look at the work itself. And in our industry, and most industries these days, information businesses and services companies, the work is visible from anywhere. It's words, it's graphic design, it's programming, it's customer service. It's things that you can evaluate from far away. And so unless you're assembling something physically, and you have to be there to actually look at the thing itself because it's physical in itself, people can do work anywhere and you can evaluate it the same way. So when I look, how do I know a programmer who lives in outside of Scottsdale is doing his work? We look at the work. And it's not that he's sitting at a desk. That doesn't mean anything. The only thing that means something is what someone actually is producing, and you can see that from anywhere. So that's what I would say. And I understand that that's a difficult thing for some people to understand because they're not used to it. And they feel like if they can't see someone, then they don't trust them, that they're kind of wasting time in the whole thing. But you can waste time in the presence of others too. So you got to look at the work at the end of the day.
Again, makes tremendous sense. And as a follow-up, what about, it's not just, okay, are they working, but how do we make sure that the remote team members feel valued? How can we make sure that the remote workers are just as engaged as those who are working in-house?
Yeah. First thing there is that I've found, and I've heard from other businesses as well, that you need to have a pretty let me put it this way. If you're going to have remote employees, let's say you have a company of 50 people, 3 being remote probably isn't going to work. They are going to feel, no matter what you do, they are going to feel separate and different because 47 are local and 3 are far away. Like, that doesn't really work very well. So you need to find a balance. Our company, we have about 50 people in the company, about 14 of them work in Chicago, and the rest work across 30 different cities around the world. So we're primarily remote. And even the people in Chicago rarely come into the office. And any one day you might find 3 or 4 or 5 people at the office, and some people come in 2 days a week. So the first step, I think, is coming up with a balanced approach to this. Otherwise, there's very little you can do to make 3 out of 47 feel like they're the other 47. It's just a hard thing to do. So that's the first thing. The other thing, though, is then basically, so let's assume you've achieved balance, or you're a new company and you're starting out and you've got maybe 3 locally and 3 remote or something like that. Then you're in a good spot. The culture you build should be basically primarily, it should work extremely well for the remote people, and then the local people should be able to work well. They should act as if they're remote. So, for example, every day in Basecamp, our Basecamp account automatically asks people what they've worked on every day, and people write it up automatically, and it's published back to Basecamp for everybody else in the company to see. So we don't have stand-up meetings locally where people talk about what they're doing or what they did. Even if they're physically in the same space, we don't do it that way. Everyone works the same way, which is people write things up and they're published into Basecamp for other people to follow along no matter where they are in the world. So everyone responds and reports on what they're working on the same way. Everybody pitches ideas the same way. So we don't get into a room if you're local and pitch an idea to somebody else. You write the idea up and you post it to Basecamp just as if you were 4,000 miles away. So you have to kind of all work the same way. You can't have different working cultures. Once you do that, you have splinters in the system, and certain people have different advantages than others, and that's where it starts to fall apart. So everyone should be working the same way regardless of where they are.
That's interesting. I never even thought about it. Like in your case, it could be your home office workers that feel that they're in the minority because most of the company are people working from the outside. I never even thought about it flipping around.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is it can be that way. And we've intentionally kept it that way because if the majority of people in our company are remote, we have to make sure remote works. If the minority of people are remote, then you can almost be like, well, we don't really need to make that work because they're in the minority, and hey, we can just hire locally and then phase out the remote people. Like that can kind of end up happening if the majority is local. So we flipped it to make sure that we're honest about that.
Yeah. And Jason, not to go too deep on this, but it really hit me because a lot of these issues we're hearing about remote work, it's the traditional big Fortune 500 company. Most people are in the office, and then they start to do, a day or two a week of working from home, or they let certain people, work from home. And not saying it can't be done, but you just explained how difficult it can be if the dominant culture, the primary culture, is still, hey, everybody, let's all pile into the conference room because I've got an idea I want to run by you. And then someone's got to remember, oh, yeah, we got to get Jason Skyped into this thing. So that's a big part of the problem.
Right. I mean, have you been in those situations where there's like 7 people in a room and then one person on Skype? Like that one person is at a huge disadvantage. And then if you play that out across the whole company and you think about there's that one other person somewhere far away or those 3 other people far away, it's just not going to work. Just like that simple conference call isn't going to work as well. Or, I mean, it's going to work for the 6 people in the room, but that 7th person is going to feel marginalized no matter what you do. So you got to really prevent that from happening.
So let's flip it around as sort of the last question on remote work. So let's say I've convinced my boss to let me try, working from home, or our entire department gets to work from home, a couple days a week. How can we as the individual contributors, the remote workers, make sure it's going to work for our boss, for our companies?
Well, I think it kind of depends. My suggestion would be you should get a team together versus an individual. So rather than saying like going to your boss and saying, hey, can I work from home? You should probably try and recruit a few other people together and say like, can we work remotely as a team? Can we show you what we can do as a team? Because I think the thing is if, again, you're just asking your boss if you can work remotely, you're creating a minority for yourself immediately. You're saying like me against the world, essentially. But if you have a small team, I think you have a little bit more, I mean, it still might be too small compared to the whole company, but let's say you're working on a team of 6 or something and say, can 3 of us work remotely or whatever? Or can we spend the next 2 weeks sort of working at home every other day? Can we all do that? I think you're just going to have a better shot at proving something or showing your boss that it can work. Because if everything's individualized where it's just this one person gets a chance to work at home, you're just at a disadvantage. And if you're trying to prove something, I think you want to put yourself in the best possible position to prove something. And if 3 people out of 6 can do it, then you're like, okay, there's something here. It's not just this one person's extraordinary or this one person's really disciplined or this one person has the best work ethic out of everybody. But it's actually a few people are able to do this. And I just think you have more weight there, more chance to make something happen. So that's what I would suggest. But the other thing I would suggest is I would sort of split it. I wouldn't say like, we're going to go off and work remotely for 2 weeks. I'd say like, give us 2 days a week at home or 2 days a week out of the office or something like that. Just kind of ease into it. I think anytime you can ease into anything, you're just in a better position to make it work. Otherwise, if it's too extreme, it's very easy for that not to work. And then it's very easy to point your boss to point at that and go, hey, that didn't work. And next time you want to do it again, you can point back to that and go, that didn't work. Or she can point back to that and go, that didn't work. So set yourself up for a good situation. Ease into it. Give yourself a little bit of chance. Prove that it's working. Once you prove that it's working, you have some leverage, which then you can apply. And maybe you can start doing it a little bit more. Maybe it's not 2 days a week. Maybe it's 3 or maybe it's 4 now, that sort of thing. And it's kind of keep prying slowly, applying the leverage that you're gaining. And at some point, assuming it works for you, people are interested in results and your boss is going to be interested in results. So she's going to go, hey, this is working. Yeah, of course you can do more of this. Who's going to say you can't do more of it if it's working? So I think that's what you have to do.
Love it. So before we wrap up, Jason, I always challenge our listeners to become 1% better every single day. Is there something you can challenge our listeners to try out, right now, today?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much, this takes a little bit of power to be able to do, but let's say that you have some small business owners listening. Cancel your next meeting. So, I think people meet far too often in person, and a lot of things that happen in person are actually better just to write up and distribute so people can read those things on their own time versus pulling everyone off their work altogether to do something that had nothing to do with right now. And I think that once you get in the habit of canceling meetings or not having meetings, and instead of writing things up and distributing things asynchronously, essentially. I mean, it doesn't matter what tool you use. Some tools are better at this than others. But you'll find that people will claim an hour back a day at least. And you do that every day. That's 5 extra hours of work a week. That's almost like a whole extra day just by cutting out a few meetings. So I'd highly recommend trying to do that. I know it's hard if you don't have the power to do that. But if you do, the gains you're going to see there are huge.
Love that advice. Meetings are huge productivity killers. That's for sure.
Yes.
All right, friends, you've just been mentored by the legendary Jason Fried. Jason, where can people find out more about your work and what you're up to these days?
Well, legendary is certainly overshooting it, but thank you for that. So you can follow me on Twitter, just Jason Fried, and that's spelled Fried, like fried. So Jason Fried on Twitter is a great place to kind of keep up on what I'm doing. And then if you follow us on our blog, Signal versus Noise, we're now hosted on Medium. So I think if you search Signal versus Noise Medium, you'll find our blog where we write really in-depth articles, stuff that challenges the status quo and the norm and the industry as a whole. We're pretty contrarian. So that's another good place to catch us. And then Basecamp.com, of course, is our product and what we use to run our business every day. And the way we're able to run is because Basecamp exists. So if you want to check something out, if you're working a lot using email or texting or chatting or meetings and you're finding yourself like everything's slipping through the cracks and work's getting more and more chaotic, give Basecamp a try.
Love it. Listeners, don't forget, you can get all of the links Jason just mentioned and the notes from this interview over at leadx.org. You can get remote, office not required, from Amazon.com or your favorite bookstore. And if you've ever gotten just one new idea from the LEADx show, please, please, please hop on over to iTunes or Stitcher, hit subscribe, and just leave a short, honest review. Until next time, remember, leadership is not about a title or power or authority. Leadership is about influence. We're all leaders. The question is, who are you going to lead today?